President Dilma Rousseff has appointed former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva as the head of her cabinet amid protests. Plus, thousands demand changes in Colombia. Thanks so much for joining us. For teleSur's English, I'm Coddy Weddle, and this is From the South. To begin today, we go to Brazil. That's where President Dilma Rousseff has appointed former President Lula da Silva as the new chief of cabinet. That happened this morning. Now, however, protests and supporters staged protests both in support and rejection of the nomination. The ceremony took place hours after a federal judge leaked a phone call between both President Rousseff and Lula, where the head of state said she was sending him the documents of his nomination. Brazilian media and opposition have interpreted the call as President Rousseff granting impunity to Lula. A federal judge has suspended Lula's appointment as chief of staff. Judge Preta Neto ruled to annul the ceremony. The judge also took part in demonstrations demanding Dilma Rousseff's ousting. Now, the judge posted his pictures on Facebook account despite the clear conflict of interest. The government says it will challenge the judge's ruling due to its partiality and lack of substance. During her speech in the swearing-in ceremony, President Rousseff harshly criticized the justice's role in meddling with the presidential decision.
Não há justiça.
There is no justice for citizens when the President of the Republic's constitutional guarantees are violated.
Presidência da República são violadas.
The Brazilian lower house has set up a new commission in an effort to relaunch an impeachment process against President Dilma Rousseff. Now, this decision comes as opposition parties are using momentum in public opinion against the president. Despite this new effort, the Supreme Court of Justice had ruled out a previous attempt since there is no evidence of President Rousseff's involvement in the Petrobras scandal. Smog levels in Mexico City have forced the first air quality alert in 14 years, which has already extended to 14 days. Over 20 million residents have been asked to stay indoors and avoid outdoor sports. Experts believe that the city's 5 million cars are largely responsible for the dangerous levels of air pollution. Colombia trade unions and social movements have staged a national strike in the face of austerity measures and privatizations being implemented by President Juan Manuel Santos. Thousands took to the streets of Colombia to demand changes as President Santos's popularity hits record lows there. Activists and politicians joined in the protests.
We need great changes in the economy, a more radical democracy, so that we can achieve transformations. We need political reform to guarantee that other sectors of the country can also participate in politics. Peace with social justice will be a huge struggle ahead for the Colombian people as a whole.
Colombia cannot continue the path of free trade, a neoliberal set of policies promoting privatization, the so-called Washington Consensus. This is destroying our country. But the worst part is that the President, Santos, says he will continue the current policies which benefit transnational corporations. He follows whatever the White House asks him to do.
For the latest on those protests now, we turn to our correspondent Natalia Margarita. She's there in the capital of Bogota. Hello there, Natalia. We saw you were tweeting today. We saw your photos and we just saw the images there. It looks like a pretty significant turnout there at the protest. So has the President Juan Manuel Santos, has he reacted to those protests?
Hi, Cody. President Juan Manuel Santos has not reacted yet to these protests. And that's actually what the three largest workers' unions are waiting for. Today, one of the leaders of those unions confirmed to us that tomorrow they will be holding once again a meeting among those workers' unions. And in this meeting, they expect to analyze any reaction that might or might not come from President Juan Manuel Santos. from now until tomorrow midday. And according to that, they will start considering whether to go or not into an indefinite strike here in Colombia. Now, it is important to clarify, Cody, also, that the demands that those workers that were joined today by student movements and social organizations, those 15 demands that they were talking about today are not new demands. In fact, these are demands that different sectors of workers have been telling to the government of Juan Manuel Santos since 2013, when we had here in Colombia a major strike, mainly by farmers and miners. After following this major strike in 2013 and over the course of the last 2 years, different sectors such as workers from the healthcare system, workers from the public education institutions, also workers from the judicial branch, among many others, have been holding different strikes, each of those sectors. And they have reached agreements with the government of Juan Manuel Santos, in fact, but none of those agreements, they blame the government for failing to comply with those agreements. And that's the reason actually what we had today, this nationwide strike that was joined by all those different sectors. So we still need to see until tomorrow if any reaction from the government comes at all, and to see what the announcement or the new announcement from these workers' unions will be according to the reaction from the government to their demands that, as I said before, are 15 demands that have to do basically with the economic model that has been implemented by the current government. That has to do with a model that they say have deepened inequality, a model that continue privatizing public sector companies, that has to do with a model that continues to benefit multinationals at the cost of the public interest and the public benefit of Colombians here in the country, Cody.
All right, Natalia and Margarita, they're reporting on those strikes, and we'll count on you, Natalia, to keep us updated in the days to come. Thanks so much, Natalia. Continuing on now, the United Nations International Court of Justice will rule on a maritime border dispute between Colombia and Nicaragua, which had already been resolved in 2002. The government of Colombia was found by the court in violation of the previous ruling, and Nicaragua filed an appeal to delimit the exact route in which international waters begin. Nicaragua's appeal comes as Colombia decided to defy the 2012 ruling, which it deemed unfair. The largest indigenous group, the Lincas and the Garifunas, joined forces to protest for justice following the murder of Berta Cáceres in Honduras. The Linca indigenous leader was killed 2 weeks ago in what appears to be a politically motivated murder. However, the government, which had harassed the indigenous leaders in the past, claimed that it was a crime of passion and have limited their investigations to follow that hypothesis. Chile will vote on a new bill to decriminalize abortion. Now, the bill would only allow the termination of pregnancy in certain cases, such as when the baby will be born dead or if the woman was raped. Activists, social movements, and local celebrities have come out in support of the reform. The bodies of 17 miners who were murdered in the state of Bolívar here in Venezuela were brought to the town of Tumeremo, where dozens honored their memory in a burial ceremony. Now, authorities say investigations continue on the circumstances which led to the murder of the miners. A violent protest broke out in the city of San Cristobal in Venezuela. Nurses were demanding improvements in their wages when opposition members joined the marches and launched violent attacks against local authorities. Now, experts believe these improvised actions could be a deliberate attempt to begin an outbreak of political violence. Leaders are in talks to agree on a new deal aimed at tackling the massive influx of refugees in the region in Europe. The leaders need to reach a binding resettlement plan, which was drawn up at an earlier summit on March 7th. Now, under the draft deal, Turkey would take back all refugees and migrants who cross into Europe from its soil in return for more money, faster EU membership talks, and quicker visa-free travel for Turkish citizens. The second round of Syria peace talks aimed at ending the 5-year conflict took place today. Delegates from the Syrian opposition's High Negotiations Committee met with United Nations mediator Staffan de Mistura. The latest talks are intended to focus on future political arrangements in Syria, a new constitution, and elections. Based on data gathered by the U.S. State Department and outside groups, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has said that the Islamic State group is committing genocide in the territories it controls.
In my judgment, Daesh is responsible for genocide against groups in areas under its control, including Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims. Daesh is genocidal by self-proclamation, by ideology, and by actions, in what it says, what it believes, and what it does.
German diplomatic missions and a school were closed in Turkey for security reasons. This, according to the German consulate in Istanbul. The closure comes less than a week after a suicide car bomb attack in the capital of Ankara. Last January, 12 German tourists were killed in a suicide attack blamed on the Islamic State group in the heart of Istanbul's tourist district. In the U.S. now, earlier today, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder testified before Congress on the Flint water crisis, which has left residents without clean drinking water. Lawmakers lambasted Snyder for how he is handling the crisis, which he has said was an administrative failure. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is also being blamed for not addressing the crisis quickly enough. During the hearing, multiple lawmakers called for the governor to resign.
I've had about enough of your false contrition and your phony apologies. Susan Hedman from the EPA bears not 1/10 of the responsibility of the state of Michigan and your administration, and she resigned, and there you are, dripping with guilt, withdrawing your paycheck, hiring lawyers at the expense of the people, and doing your dead level best to spread accountability to others and not being accountable.
French students from high schools and universities staged a massive protest against the unpopular labor reforms recently proposed by the government. Last week, the government dropped plans to cap severance pay for dismissed workers, but the students want the rigid labor reform to be dropped altogether. Earlier today, South Africa's opposition leader called on President Jacob Zuma to resign. Mmusi Maimane brought up the allegations that a wealthy family close to Zuma had influence over political appointments, which the president has so far denied. Now, it is alleged that Zuma's deputy finance minister was offered the position of finance minister by the wealthy family. Shortly after, the opposition leader had an exchange with the parliament speaker and was told to leave. The World Food Program has been able to distribute food to the displaced people in South Sudan's Unity State. The area was previously inaccessible to humanitarian groups. According to the charity, tens of thousands of people there are in need of food.
At any one time, we have about 10 to 15 of our field teams out in the field doing mobile operations in areas, including in these areas in Unity where there has been concern that certain people are facing catastrophic food insecurity conditions. And we're really managing to get the mobile teams into those places at the moment. And if we can sustain and increase this access, there's every chance that we'll be able to prevent a famine in South Sudan as the lean season approaches.
Former FIFA president Joseph Blatter has lodged an appeal against his 6-year ban from soccer for ethics violations. Now, the Court of Arbitration for Sport said Blatter wanted to overturn a decision by FIFA's Appeals Committee in February. Meanwhile, FIFA published information for the first time that shows the organization paid Blatter over $3 million last year, while the organization itself lost over $100 million in 2015. Spanish illusionist Jorge Blas is bringing a new kind of magic to the world stage as he adds technology to his bag of tricks. His strategy has even impressed world-renowned magician David Copperfield, who bought the rights to perform one of Blas's illusions involving social media in the United States. Now, Blas will be performing in his show titled Magician's Word in the Teatro de Luz for the next 4 weeks there in Spain. And that's what we're covering today on this Thursday. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to follow us on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For teleSur English, I'm Coddy Weddle. We'll see you back here tomorrow.